Sometimes I'm even embarrassed or ashamed a bit to say that I'm a journalist, because in the 90s, during these transitional times to democracy, people had a lot of hope that media will be one of the pillars of building this democracy. Now, when they hear that you're a reporter or a journalist, they are like, yeah, well, you're one of those people lying to us on TV.
We are all living in extreme polarized societies where independent coverage or critical media have a particular position.
We don't fight with the same resources. The resources of independent media are poor. The resources of propagandist media are huge. So it's not an even fight.
Koje? Pa na javnom sam prostoru. Halo, bolan. Šta vi napadaš, bolan, kameru? Halo!
We are facing many media outlets going toward pro-government reports. They are actually posting and publishing what the government wants them to. So that's the role. I do believe it's a big trouble for all of us, not just for journalists themselves and us as somebody who's trying to do a better job than that, but also for citizens that are under impact of false news, because that's false news.
I think it's on the one hand, I think the media in the region doesn't really play the role, the watchdog role that the media should play in a democracy. Of course, we have positive examples of journalists doing a really good job. Overall, when you look at how the role of the professional media is understood in these societies, I think there is much more to be done.
I feel that especially in times of a crisis like everything related to COVID basically is, I feel that people truly finally understand how important good journalism is, what exactly journalism that takes people, citizens and public good seriously, how impactful it really can be on their lives.
The pandemic has obviously put many limits to the work of journalists, starting with the freedom of movement. So rather than being out and about, as many journalists, as most journalists do, we now spend long hours on Zoom. Yet I would argue that many journalists are actually doing quite a good job, that they are more committed, even more determined than usual.
Pandemic was an awful thing for the planet. It did not bring anything good for us as well. But in terms of journalism, I must say it brought the best of us. I think that most journalists who are doing their job properly actually approached new readers by doing their job during pandemic.
The coronavirus pandemic was an opportunity for journalism, and perhaps not just for journalism, but also for some other professions whose mission is to provide accurate information, also provide expertise.
Previous crisis forced a lot of publishers to let some of their reporters go. What happened then, and we're seeing now, is that, let's say, one reporter now have to cover education and healthcare and social affairs all in one. And we don't see the expertise in, let's say, experienced health reporters that have been covering the beat for years that can now adequately cover the pandemic. Now we see general assignment reporters struggling to wrap their heads around the scientific data and the wave of fake news, etc., etc. So we saw this scarcity of beat reporters.
Governments who took advantage of the state of emergency to try to further restrict media's access. In my country, in the country where I live, Hungary, that meant that because of new fines and the threat of imprisonment or being fined for spreading fake news, intentionally or unintentionally. Journalists that had a chilling effect on journalists.
A big part of the media is sponsored by the government. In Turkey, 90% of national media, mainstream media outlets are sponsored by the government. Billion and billion euro each year for nothing, just for portraying the president, just for advertisement of official actions, etc. But people realize that.
Pogledao me, ja sam njemu pokazao svoju pres karticu, na što je on mene opsovao. I ponovo počeo da me udara.
The COVID-19 pandemic has affected every single newsroom, I think, all over the world. Not only because of the tremendous difficulty and stress that many reporters were put under, not only because of the difficulty of actually going out and reporting when it's very dangerous, but also because of budgets and a total, economic collapse that of course affected the business models of many media.
The recent financial crisis that our countries are facing over the last 10 years, I think that has put all of us to a new conjuncture where we have to define the new journalism to challenge these problems, but also to question ourselves in the way that we are mobilized in the society.
We already see governments in the region playing a huge, disproportionately big role in funding media, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's governments fund arts and culture. The problem in our region is that governments are funding media as a way to control it. They want to use it as an instrument of propaganda.
One of the key issues is that we cannot just anymore state the obvious, but we need to take action. And I think this story about political control of the media and business of the media actually goes to the question of the market and who owns the media. I wouldn't even dare to look at the numbers of how much are media that are controlled by politicians and tycoons funded and how much are independent media funded. So at the end of the day, no matter how horrible that sounds, I think we cannot compete only to find trust with citizens, etc., if we are not even on the market.
I think that we also need to work with the young journalists to teach them the right work, ethics, professionalism, and do the best actually to save the integrity of this profession. And I think that our focus should primarily be on helping and teaching them, actually to allowing them to fall in love with this job.
The only people that can help you are readers, and you need to have trust from those readers if you expect them to not only invest their time reading you or listening to you or watching you, you also need them to invest money. They need to help you to be more independent.
I mean, I think the focus needs to remain the same, uncovering abuses of the government, uncovering corruption, uncovering misuse of funds, and uncovering some of the absolutely ridiculous expenditures and political inanities that we've all gotten used to living with.
I think what is really important to do, especially when it comes to NGOs, civil society organizations, is to really start thinking about journalism out of the box. What is really important these days is to really involve the young generation in that.
Another important role of media NGOs such as SEENPM members is to encourage and to facilitate innovation in journalism. Innovation usually comes from interaction, from networking, which then can lead to collaboration. And collaboration will, I think, be the single most important feature of future journalism, and it will come in many forms, no doubt about it.
My gut feeling is that even though we might see some technical innovation or artificial intelligence or whatever the bells and the whistles are in terms of technology, even in 10 years' time, what we do is good journalism and good storytelling. I think the main principles that constitutes a good news story or a good feature will still be the same.
Future will bring us more data journalism. I believe we all need to be much better in understanding and knowing how to bring a more advanced level of journalism to people. That means that we will all have to focus more on getting data, working with data, but instead of making more stories out of data, I believe that we'll have to actually compact those data into smaller products. That means instead of, huge stories, long read, those things that we are used to and that we are good at, we will have to refocus a little bit and start making much more multimedia elements, animations, maybe even games. We made a game a couple of years ago and it went very well. People actually learned about public procurement system through our game, online game.
I hope that in 10 years we're going to have journalists who are going to be adequately paid for the jobs they do, and that they're going to start acting like the fourth estate, which what actually they are. But when it's about media in 10 years and when we are talking about technologies and everything, I think that numerous challenges await the media. The world is changing, technology is changing, but I see that actually is a great advantage for the media.
But what gives me hope is that I've met across the region really, really talented kids. And they don't care about the oligarchs. They don't care about that this job actually pays very little or usually pays peanuts. They're in it for the storytelling. They're in it for telling the truth.
Political polarization is just a poison, and which is taking most of our time, but which will never bring a solution. Which will never have a political step for the people. That's why I think that we should, with the new generation, all the results that we're supposed to get should be adapted to their need and to their future.